Good afternoon, Twitchers. I am your host, Luke. Please welcome our guest today, Chris from Aberrant Realities, a game producer from Canberra. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you do, make sure you drop a follow and go follow our guest today on their Twitter at aberrealdev. So ABREALDEV, and their website is doubleshot.vr.com. Chris, please introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name's Chris. I am the system designer slash audio guy slash producer slash a whole bunch of other hats for Aberrant Realities. We're a VR startup company from Canberra, and we love making indie games.
Nice. So, what is your job?
So my job is to essentially make sure that everything's going smoothly, that things like our upcoming Journey to PAX is all arranged. It's more the quote unquote boring side. I don't find it boring personally, but I think a lot of people do. It's the side of games that a lot of people don't talk about. It's the side of making sure that it's not all just 100% development work. It's also the work of finding ways to make your game as successful as possible and to get it out there. So, and then on top of that, I also do all of our audio recording and stuff like that. And I also do things like design our weapons and all that sort of thing for our games. So I think when you're an indie dev, you end up wearing a lot of different hats, whether you want to or not. And I think that that's one of the really cool things about indie dev is just how much there is to do and how many different prospects and pathways there are now for people to go down.
Okay, so you mentioned indie dev. Like, if someone's not really familiar with an indie dev compared to a normal dev, can you just give us a little rundown on that?
So I don't think any two indie dev studios are going to be the same. I think in our case, indie dev to us means that we are completely independent of having any form of publisher or financial backing from any institution other than grants that we receive occasionally from the Academy of Interactive Entertainment because we're graduates from there and we've entered into agreement with them.
Yep.
I think that with indie dev has kind of become this word for any game that's not strictly AAA or doesn't fit into a particular mold. It becomes like a game that is considered indie. So I think that there are a lot of games you could call indie that maybe not necessarily aren't indie, and a lot of games that are indie that wouldn't call themselves indie. So I think there's a big overlap now with the amount of games that are being created now with regard to those kind of statements.
Thanks for that. Okay, so what got you into the field you're working in, indie development?
In terms of getting here, essentially, I went through the Academy of Interactive Entertainment here in Canberra. I'd always had a passion for games, as I'm sure a lot of people had. But I took that passion seriously enough to drop out of university, say that I'd had enough of that, and to go and attend the AIE, go through that. I met 6 other like-minded guys that I really enjoyed working with. So we did some game jams and things together where we really enjoyed working with each other. And when it came time to graduate, we kind of said to each other that because the likelihood of us getting a job in the AAA industry was extremely low, we kind of said, well, why don't we just try and make games ourselves?
Yep.
And we were fortunate enough to land on our feet with that. So
nice.
It's been great, yeah.
So the field you're working in, game development, what do you love about it and what do you hate about it?
Look, it's a really enjoyable process. Like it's fun to wake up in the morning and the first thing you think about is the game that you're making at the moment. I think it does at times feel like any other job where there's parts that you love and parts that you hate. I think it's easy to get burnt out on projects. I think it's easy to spend too long on a project and not really be able to see the end of it. I think that it's hard being an indie dev in Australia because there's a relatively small community and it's really awesome. But in some ways, it also does feel a little bit isolating. Luckily enough, we actually work in a co-working space here in Canberra. There's also one in Adelaide called Game Plus, and essentially it's comprised of a whole bunch of studios like us that are in similar situations to us, and you can kind of field questions off each other and bounce ideas off each other and discuss with each other what you're doing, what you're working on, and basically it's just like almost a support network that you can talk to in person in a field that sometimes it's really hard to find someone in person to talk to about it.
Yep. Yeah. Nice. So pretty much, in short, that was you love, the community, sense of community sort of thing, and you hate that just like sometimes you can get burnt out and
Yeah,
any other job.
and
I
I think
guess.
even then, hate is a strong word. I think that the things that I would find most difficult about the job is also, and this is kind of swinging back around to being an indie dev, is the fact that unless you're extremely fortunate, it's very difficult to find ways to pay yourself for your work. So we do a lot of contract work on the side to support ourselves. I think all of us have part-time jobs
Yep.
in some form or another that we do on the side, and none of us expected indie dev to make us rich. We purely do it because we're passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not me saying that everyone should go out and do it and not get paid for it, and that's perfect and fine. But I think if it's something that you really want to do, then you do find ways to make it work.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what has been your greatest achievement so far?
Our greatest achievement was waking up one morning and finding out that we'd been selected for the PAX Australia India Showcase.
Yep.
So that was something a coworker and I were sitting in the office, and we'd applied for a bunch of other things. We'd been knocked back for it, and he kind of came over and said to me, "Well, why don't we just throw $5 at this and sorry, $50 at this. If it was $5, we probably wouldn't have worried. No, let's just throw $50 at this. Let's see what happens." And it was actually I had taken that day off, and I woke up to this phone call, and it was a representative ringing up and basically letting us know that we'd won the PAX Indie Showcase, which is something I had actually completely forgotten that we even applied for, and it took me like 2 minutes of half asleep, kind of just bleariness to kind of work out what had just happened to us. So we sat on that news for a little while, and then it came time, and we announced it, and it's been crazy ever since. Because receiving that kind of recognition for something that you've worked on is not a feeling that we had really had before, and to have that feeling has been extremely vindicating for us. So we'll be headed down to Melbourne in October to showcase our game to the rest of the world, which we're super excited about. So I think that has been by far our crowning achievement, and I think that one of our lesser achievements is just the sheer fact that we've been able to kind of keep the dream going for the last year and a bit.
Yep.
Here at Aberrant Realities. So, like, it's been 50% hard work and 50% stubbornness that have kind of seen us through to this point that we're at.
So 2 years was it that you've been working on this project?
So we started off in late 2016. I think it was around October. It started off as this student project that we were doing for our final year, where we had 15 weeks to make a game as a portfolio piece. And we were discussing this idea for a game where we wanted to do something in virtual reality because it was this brand new thing that had just come out. And we were kind of saying to each other, well, what kind of game do we want to make? Do we want to make a robot game? Do we want to make and at the time, like Job Simulator was really big. And I think that was definitely one of our earlier influences in terms of the mundane can be fun in virtual reality. And it got to a point where we said, well, are there many bartending simulators out? And at the time, there just wasn't. We were like, it's cool to have a simulator, but we kind of want the player to be able to do something a little bit more than that. And then we kind of said, well, why don't we also add this concept of it's also a wave shooter at the same time. So there was this whole kind of process that happened over those 15 weeks where we were kind of getting into our head the kind of game that we wanted to make. And then once we'd graduated, we decided that it was a good enough idea for us to warrant taking it even further than we had. So I think that even though it feels like it's been a while that we've worked on it, there are periods of time where we weren't working on it because we were doing other things. We were doing contract work.
Yeah, yeah.
We were on holidays, whatever. But the accumulative amount of work that we've done on it has been pretty high, and it's just been an awesome experience to see this thing go from a bunch of gray cubes moving about the place to now what people can see today, sort of thing. So
yeah. So VR games are quickly becoming more and more popular. Like, do you think in 5 years' time they will have overtaken certain systems like the PlayStation and the Xbox, or do you think they're gonna keep that low profile sort of thing? What's your opinion on that?
I think that the PlayStation VR is a really cool example of marketing something towards the consumer, because at the moment a lot of the virtual reality stuff available is enthusiast. So in the sense of you're spending upwards of 600-700 Australian dollars at the lowest price point for a standing VR experience, on top of having a machine that can run it. Whereas when the PlayStation VR came out, I think it was about $600-700 total.
Yeah.
And obviously that was on top of having a machine that people already had. But the idea of making virtual reality accessible to consumers is a whole other ball game, and it's technically, unless your game is super popular like the Rick and Morty VR game or Job Simulator or even Budget Cuts or something like that, making virtual reality games isn't necessarily the most profitable thing in the world, compared to, say, game development for conventional platforms. And despite that, I think that in the next 5 years, there's definitely going to be a growth in that market. I think people are still going to want to play mouse and keyboard, controller, traditional games. But I think that virtual reality itself is going to take off and become a much more widely accepted platform. Purely for the simple fact of it's just so damn fun. Like and it's so involved and interactive, and there's lots of cool things being done with it. I think it's a case of the technology is there, but people are still trying to figure out what exactly they want to do with it.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to learn, because it's fairly new, I guess, isn't it? It's newer than most things.
Yeah, and you're applying completely different design principles to it. So instead of just handing a player a controller, you're suddenly giving them the ability to interact with their world literally with their hands, or with their, being able to pick up and grab objects and all that, like you couldn't with a controller. And I think it's a little bit disconcerting for some people at first. I think everyone has their first kind of freak out, but once you get beyond that, it's super awesome. So
I've only used the phone one where you put it in the goggles, and it's kind of and it gives me such bad motion sickness because I get that in the car anyway. So, but I guess that's something that they can they'll eventually work on, is how to overcome that motion sickness.
Yeah, motion sickness has definitely become less of a thing since we've got standing scale. I don't know if you can see us, but like podcast listeners won't be able to see it. That's fine. I'll describe it for them. We've actually got a sensor up there in the corner. And there's also one over there. Basically, where those sensors are looking is our play space. So we can move around in that play space. We can jump, all that sort of thing, and it tracks that. And when you're able to move, then it removes that whole feeling of inertia from putting the headset on and staying still, but everything around you is moving. So I do know some people still manage to get motion sick from that, and people get motion sick from certain elements of VR. But for the most part, I think people are pretty okay. They're starting to get okay with it. So
that's something that as I said, that the more technology comes in, the more it'll become easier for stuff like that to be worked out, I guess. Best way to put it for someone like me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So, what are you struggling with now?
Um, I think the big things that we struggle with, and I can't speak for every indie developer's experience with this, but for us, it's getting your game noticed is probably one of the hardest things that we're finding about our
Yep.
game. Like we've been lucky enough to win PAX Oz and all that, but until we release our game on Steam, like we hit the release button on Steam, and until we actually put our game forward and say, "Hey, here it is, world," we won't actually know how many sales we're getting,
Yeah.
and we can see indications from social media and all that kind of thing. We can see people interacting, we can see people looking at things, but it's hard to find a way to find quantifiable evidence on how many people are going to buy your game.
Yeah.
Which, when it's what you've spent the last year and a half, 2 years doing, is a pretty scary prospect. In a lot of ways, we're not banking on Double Shot doing well
Mm-hmm.
by any means because it's a VR game and it's going to sell uh, you know okay at best
Yeah.
compared to a lot of other titles. But I think the 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 biggest thing and the biggest wake up call that we had this year was the actual business of indie games is completely different from the development of indie games,
Yeah.
and it took a lot of research on our part and a lot of asked questions and a lot of scares in order to get to the point where we were kind of comfortable with the idea of business. So look, I'm sure if we had someone who managed all of that, we could just focus on the development and be happy. But due to the way that we operate, that is obviously something that we've had to kind of come to terms with and work out ourselves. So I think that's probably been the most difficult thing that we're struggling with right now. So
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Okay. So you spoke about social media and stuff. How do you get your name out there as an up and coming company? How does someone
yeah,
get their name out there?
I think that you've got to have something about your game that really appeals to an audience. So uh, around the time that we were making our game, stuff like Kung Fury was coming out, and Synthwave has been making this really big resurgence at the moment. So
Yep.
that was something that was kind of like a hook that we could latch onto, and we could say to people, well, here's our cool '80s synthwave game. Oh, and it's also in virtual reality. So we kind of had that hook, and then we had something to push it even further. And I think that a lot of our social media efforts express that. It's about building a personality for your game that appeals to people. So um, this is just me using an offhanded example. One of the cooler games that I see on social media a lot is a game called Dead Static Drive, which is made by Mike Black and his team.
Yeah.
And Mike actually posts a lot of his stuff on Twitter, and we see it and we go, "God damn, that's really cool." They are extremely good at showcasing their game.
Yeah.
And I think that the art of showcasing your game is what is really going to get it noticed,
Yeah.
is finding the cool parts of your game and pushing them out for the world to see.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. So, um, we was. I'm sorry. Okay. So I asked you what are you struggling with now? What was something you struggled with in the past?
In the past, I think that just our sheer lack of inexperience caused us a lot of issues. I think this idea of being fresh faced graduates and everything that you do when you're learning doesn't really compare to the actual reality of creating a finished, polished experience.
Yeah.
So I think that jump there was something that we struggled with a lot. But as we started making more and more things and we started doing more game jams and we started understanding how our team members worked together and what they did well, what kind of skill gaps we needed to fill. Like when we first started this, we didn't have anyone who did audio.
Yeah.
And that was like a really big kind of skill that we were missing. We had no one had done AI before, so someone had to learn how to do AI. Someone had to learn how to. So I think, and this is just like a natural progression for indie teams is finding out what your team is good at and creating a a team that works
Yeah.
from that.
So, all right. So, what advice would you give someone who is just starting out?
Um, it depends on what they want to do. If they're a programmer, uh, then I suppose my best piece of advice would be, and it's even the case for designers, is just have a play around with the game engines, because we live in this amazing time now where we have Unity and Unreal, which are two completely free game engines that produce extremely high quality,
Hmm.
uh, can produce extremely high quality games.
Yep.
And I think that with the way that the internet is now, the amount of wealth of resources that people can access is so crazy now that it's easy to find out things. But I think the best thing that you can kind of do is have a look at what other people do around you, whether that be via Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Like join dev communities on as part of Facebook groups or on Twitter or whatever,
Yep.
and have a look at what they're doing, because quite often, and this is something that I found when we were kind of flailing around looking for ways to do things and all that, is that most people are absolutely willing to take the time out of their day to talk to you about something.
Hmm. Yep.
And I think that that's also one of the really awesome things about the Australian indie games industry, is everyone that we've talked to has been so nice and polite, and they've just given us so much valuable information.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think that, look, there's so many career paths and opportunities for people to go down, even if it's not necessarily games. The skills involved around the creation of games are, in a lot of ways, not just about games. So the idea of communication, the idea of user experience design, all of that kind of thing, even though it's something that's used in games, there are so many different applications for it that I think that if people look around and diversify a lot, they're going to find something that interests them.
Yeah. So just keep just talk to people, and get ideas off them, and use those ideas with your own little flair. And
Absolutely.
okay. So, what is the best tip for someone struggling to grow, in your opinion?
For someone struggling to grow, like, I think we're still at a point where we haven't necessarily grown in terms of our output or anything like that. But I think that just by being present and by regularly working on things and sharing those things with people, people are more aware of what we're doing. We feel like we're moving forward. And we're kind of at this cutting edge sort of industry with regards to VR, where everyone thinks it's this brand new cool thing.
Yep.
And a lot of companies are starting to discover that VR is this brand new cool thing that they can use in a bunch of different ways. So I think being in a cutting edge industry is definitely a way to grow rapidly. I think one of the big things that I was discussing or have discussed in the past with Seb, who runs the incubator here in Game Plus, really cool guy. He has kind of said, like, one of the big advantages of having these small indie teams is their ability to just pivot on the spot really quickly and go towards like a whole new direction. So doing things like rapid prototyping, finding out what ideas work, and then going to most profitable at the time.
Yep.
Because I think previously, or with a lot of larger studios, there's this whole idea of you got to go one way sort of thing. You got to,
Yeah.
like, this is what we do, this is what we work towards. And now that you've got all of these different work environments and all these people with different skills, it's a much easier to just pivot and head towards a completely different direction that you think is going to be a growing industry. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So, how difficult is it to get an indie game to a mainstream platform? Like how, like, you've got your double shot, VR. How hard
Yep.
is it to get that into the Oculus Rift or into the HTC Vive? How hard is that? And what
So
process do you take?
yeah, so at the moment we're just on Steam. Steam was by far the most accommodating
Yep.
in terms of the process. Um, Doing the store setup and everything was pretty headache free. They're
Yep.
pretty stringent about things that they want. Their version control is great. So getting onto the other stores requires a little bit more involvement in a way. And because this is our first time doing it, I think we kind of just wanted to dip our toe in the water with Steam because it's by far the most well known distribution platform.
Yep.
It's going to be the one that generates a lot of our sales.
Hmm.
I was talking to the programmer James about this before, and he essentially said that places like the Oculus Store and the HTC, the name of it escapes me right now, but the HTC Store, they're kind of walled gardens where you know for a fact that people are going to have those particular headsets, so they're going to have that technology available. They're going to be
Yeah.
hungry and they're going to be looking.
Yep.
So you're going to get a more focused audience from there, but you're going to get a much wider audience and a much larger audience from something like Steam.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
yeah,
Keep
and
going.
setting up for Steam was pretty easy. So
Yeah. So you'd recommend going with Steam as someone starting out.
like if you're confident that your game, uh, if you're confident in your product, then for sure, because I think that Steam is going to get you by far the largest amount of, or it has the largest user base for you to put your game out there. So, and that might not necessarily always be the case with regard to obviously having wall gardens like Oculus and Viveport.
Yep.
But for the sake of what we're doing, we're happy just putting it on Steam.
Cool. Cool. Okay. So, what technology advances will help with game development in the coming years? We've got a heap of stuff that's being worked on and stuff. What in your opinion is something that you're looking forward to even in technology advancements?
Look, any general technology advancement is always going to help game development. When you look at games like even 4 or 5 years ago compared to now, the way
Yeah.
that workflows, especially in terms of art, and art is quite often the most, or the one that people notice the most,
Hmm.
in terms of what they see as game advancement. If you look at art and how it's progressing pretty rapidly. There's always new things being added to the pipeline. There's new ways to do things. There's new ways to make it look all glitz and glam. I also think that questions of things like accessibility and user experience and all that are also being pushed more to the forefront of games nowadays.
Yep.
So if you were to look at a game menu from, 10, 15 years ago to now, then you're obviously going to see a huge difference. And I think that difference is going to keep on happening because as we go, we're learning more and more, and we're being given more ways to present information to an audience in a way that is conducive to them actually enjoying the experience.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Okay. Okay. So, what do you see yourself doing in 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years? Now.
Oh, 2 years. I think I'd like Double Shot to be released. We're looking at releasing it pretty soon, but I think it's when the way that I live now, I'm kind of living like day to day almost with regards to indie development. It's hard to see exactly where I want to go.
Yeah.
I think indie is a super cool way to get experience in order to break into the AAA industry, which is kind of what I'm using it for.
Yeah.
And look, in 10 years, if I was, working at Blizzard or Ubisoft or wherever, then there definitely wouldn't be any complaints from me. But I think for some people, they want to be lifelong indie devs. I think that, once again, not unlike studios in general, it's kind of a case by case basis about where people want to go with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And in my case, I kind of see it as a stepping stone towards a much larger goal.
Yeah, so you eventually want to be working for a AAA company.
Yeah, like that'd be the absolute dream. But I
Yeah,
also feel like there's enough happening in other sectors and other places that I'm going to be engaged and interested regardless of what happens between now and then.
yeah. Okay, so I'll touch a little bit on the AAA thing. What would be the dream for you? Dream job?
Sorry, can you just repeat that question?
Sorry. What would be your dream company to work for?
Oh, you put me on the spot here. There's so many. Look, I think I've always been a really big fan of Blizzard games. I've been a
Yep.
big fan of their design practices. Been a big fan of how much money the company itself makes and the way that they make that money. I
Yep.
think that they're really smart. So I think working for Blizzard or uh, even a company like BioWare would be just super cool. BioWare games were kind of my, I guess you could call it almost an awakening that games were this really cool platform where you could tell amazing stories and you could create these experiences that stayed with people for a long time. So I think that it'd be amazing to work for them, but
Yep.
it might ruin the games a little bit at the same time. So
Mm,
it's kind of this. But look, hey, if they're paying money and if I get to do what I love, then chances are I'm going to go almost anywhere.
yeah, definitely. So I'm guessing you're a big WoW fan.
Yeah, like absolutely massive WoW fan.
Yeah.
I think it's uh, much to the dismay of a lot of my other team members. I think it's one of the cooler games out there.
Yeah.
And I think from the outside, it looks like this super weird game, and it looks super weird to pay $16.50 a month for it. But like, I think at this point, I'm so hooked that it's just kind of like whatever. Like, this is the game I want to play, sort of thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's been sorry.
I've never played it, so I've got no idea. I've watched a few people play it, but it's just not my type of game. I'm more of a I don't know, like the MMOs. Like I like them, and they look nice, and they're pretty, and the artwork's brilliant on them. But there's so much going on. Like
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge info dump, and it's something that I was talking about earlier with regard to delivering information to a
yeah,
player, and it's a super hard thing to pull off. And I think that a lot of MMOs come out, and there's also this whole idea of a sunken cost in the game, where if someone's been playing World of Warcraft for 8 years, 9 years, 13 years, whatever,
yeah, yeah,
then there's going to be a hesitancy to move on to other games. And I think that that's a really interesting kind of polar opposite to virtual reality, which is kind of designed for those short play experiences.
yeah,
So, like, honestly, at this point, World of Warcraft is just something that I can pack it in the end of the day, go home, play it, relax,
yeah,
and just enjoy it for what it is. But I think that game development and play extremely different things simply because uh, while game development is an awesome job, it still feels like a job. There's still work in it, and it is extremely draining
yeah,
to think creatively all the time. So it's nice to just go home and enjoy something else that someone made. And
yeah,
I think one of the coolest things about game design is seeing something that you made be enjoyed by other people. And
yeah,
I think that's one of the most honestly satisfying feelings in the world is to be able to see that, is to be able to see someone have a big grin on their face because they played something that you made.
yeah. Definitely, definitely. Okay, so tell me about the process of making a game like Double Shot. Talk me through
Um,
start to
our
finish.
process is our process is really interesting. It all started like we were all just sitting around having lunch, just pitching ideas to each other, um, and eventually got to a point where we had to start making a prototype. And we kind of said we want mixing the drinks to feel really good. We
Yeah,
want shooting the guns to feel really good. Everything else is secondary for now. And then we had this prototype that was essentially that. It was essentially mixing drinks, shooting guns. Everything felt good.
yeah, yeah,
And once that was over, once that 15-week project was over and we had that perfected, we were like, well, we took a break. We actually went and worked on something else. We worked on a commercial project.
Yep.
And that was a huge learning experience in terms of game design for us. So we basically went back and we set about trying to deliver as good an experience as we possibly could with Double Shot. So adding a lot of like user experience things, and it's been a process of iteration for us to about our game, see what parts people really love, see what parts they hate, change things, make it as accessible as possible as we can to a pretty wide audience,
Yep.
which is pretty difficult to do with virtual reality. But we've kind of focused on that a little bit, probably not as much as we should, but that's fine. We kind of had a look at the actual like longevity of play, because one of the big complaints about a lot of virtual reality games is the fact that there's just not enough content in them. So we found ways to generate meaningful content for players, content that they could enjoy without having to worry about it being like, too samey or too grindy or too repetitive or whatever. Because doing grindy, repetitive activities in virtual reality doesn't always feel like the best thing in the world. But luckily enough for us, our core gameplay loop is kind of interesting enough to warrant doing it multiple times.
Yep.
And I think that's been a really cool experience for us to basically have this game from infancy all the way to where it is now currently, because between now and then we've learned so many different lessons, we've learned so many different new ways of doing things, whether it be art or programming or design and all that kind of thing, that it's been a great experience for us to learn how the heck we do the actual process of creating a game itself, because it's this kind of weird, mysterious thing until you pull back the curtain and you realize it's just a bunch of people working on it, on their individual tasks each week, getting together, comparing notes, going back and doing the whole thing all over again until you end up with a game that you're proud of and that travels in a direction that you think is really awesome. So yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to just trial and error, seeing what feels good, seeing what feels bad.
Yep.
Trying out the quote unquote dumb ideas, because quite often they're some of the better ones.
Yeah.
And look, it's just been a really enjoyable experience.
Nice. Like, I guess that's one of the most important things. You got to be having fun, and if you're not having fun, I guess that would almost like in the Twitch industry. Like, if you're not having fun, people can see it. Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think trying to maintain a work environment that's not toxic is one of the key things to that.
Yep.
So we're all pretty good friends outside of the office as well. So we know that if we end up having an argument or whatever, or we don't agree on something, it's not going to break anything while we sort that out.
Yep.
Most nights we're usually playing games together or something. I actually live with one of my coworkers, which is interesting. But it's good to be able to go home and have a chat with him and hang out with him. Like, he's one of my best friends. So it's this whole idea of when you end up working in a team of 7 people, you end up being pretty close with each other.
Yeah.
And in a way, that sucks for certain things, but it also makes the whole thing a lot more enjoyable.
Definitely. It's just like just a bunch of mates doing what they love, and that's awesome in my opinion.
Yeah, like beats anything else I ever did. So
yeah.
I don't know about these guys, whether they had something better cooking in the background, but
yeah, like if you're enjoying it, like, go nuts, because I live on it once I get. I wish I could afford to do something like. I'm not really into game development. Go full time for streaming or something like that. Something that I'm enjoying. Something that I.
Yeah, it's at this point it almost becomes a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
To live paycheck to paycheck, but do this, enjoy it, see where it leads. Like, I feel like that there's a point where you kind of got to say, look, this isn't working. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
But thankfully, we're all incredibly stubborn, so we haven't reached that point yet. But yeah, I think that it definitely requires a certain mindset to do.
Yeah.
And it's the mindset of I'm doing what I love. and
Yeah.
money is at this point secondary to me. And look, I'm sure that in 5 or so years, when we're all multimillionaires, all rolling around in our big vault full of money or whatever,
Yeah.
then we're gonna look back at this and just say
It was worth it.
it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And even if we're not rolling around in money, even if we're all living in a cardboard box, I think that we'd probably still end up saying that it was worth it because we got to do what we loved. So
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah, wholesome.
instead of being stuck at a shitty ass job that you hate, you're here and you're enjoying yourself. And
Yeah.
Yeah. The main thing is you're enjoying it. Okay. So why are you making indie games instead of aiming on game? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure how worked out to be indie or not. So what? But why are you making indie?
Yeah. So because there's only 7 of us, we kind of got to keep our games pretty low scale. We also wanted the independence of being able to make what we wanted, not what someone told us that they wanted us to make. Because I think that being able to express ourselves is something that we find pretty important at this stage of our lives. And when I say at this stage of our lives, I mean just us as a company. I think we find it pretty important.
Yeah.
One of the big things I think at this point is just being able to do what we love, do it from this office, which we pay a reasonable amount of rent for.
Yeah.
And be labeled as an indie studio is actually super handy for us in a lot of ways because purely accidentally people love indie games, which is why the label never hurts. Like there are some people who won't play AAA games and won't touch them, they'll only play indie games.
Yeah.
And I think that for those people and that market, the label doesn't hurt. And I think that we're honestly small enough and poor enough. And that is not to say that all indie labels are or all indie companies are small and poor.
Yeah.
But in our particular case, we are small and poor, and we are very indie.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. So
yeah. So, you mentioned that like people that don't play AAA games for whatever reason, money or like whatever breed, I guess, from AAA companies. So in that, is indie game community a successful community?
I think it's an amazing community. I think that so the cool thing about indie is it doesn't really matter what genre your game is. Your game could be a far-flung 80s action bartending simulator. It could be a game about like a very angry. Is it a goose? I think, yeah, the Angry Goose game. It could be fire. Like, there's all of these different games that are being made that are all considered indie, but they're all really cool in their own particular way. And I think that's the huge draw about indie is that there's always something that appeals to everyone. And the stories that are getting told there, I think, are a lot more important to people than some of the stories that are being told by AAA studios.
Yeah. There's some amazing AAA games. Cool, and I haven't really touched into the indie development because not having a good PC on my end is probably my biggest downfall. Because having a PlayStation or a Nintendo Switch, majority of them are AAA's. Okay? And
there is a cool thing that. Sorry.
No, you go. What were you gonna say?
There is a cool thing that the Switch is doing with regard to indie games, wherein they're approaching a lot of indie developers and basically giving them the opportunity to develop games for their platform or to port their games to their platform. And that's giving consumers a much wider range of choice than they previously had with Nintendo consoles, which in a lot of ways appeals to a lot more people to buy the Switch. So it's a super smart business decision.
Definitely.
But I think that the cost of upgrading a PC is always going to be more than the cost of having a console. So I think that, and this is touching back on something we discussed further with one of the problems with VR, is the fact that currently the accessibility bar is way higher than a lot of people can warrant making that purchase for.
Yeah.
So we rely in a lot of ways on the select few enthusiasts who happen to buy virtual reality and use virtual reality.
Yeah. Yeah, like I could never afford it and at the moment. But VR headset. I don't know now. They're about 400 for PlayStation one.
Yeah, and once you start looking at the PC ones, the price hikes up all the way to the Vive, which is like $800
Yeah.
to $1,200. It's and the prices have dropped a lot,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're still
Yeah. Way
pretty
out of my
crazy.
price range because I'll need to buy like
Yeah, yeah,
you'll need a pretty beastie computer, I think. Yeah, if I'm
yeah,
not wrong.
yeah. I think at least like a 1050, um,
Yeah.
or even like a 970. Like it's a shame. It really is a shame. Like it's something that's kind of unavoidable at this point.
Yeah.
And once PCs are kind of start to become in line with those minimum specs and VR becomes more available, then you're going to see a lot more people playing it and enjoying it. But it is a shame in a lot of ways because currently it's blocking a lot of people off from experiencing that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think VR does really well at like trade shows and all that kind of thing, is because people don't have it in their homes. It's a lot more of a novelty, which means that people
Yeah.
kind of yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm seeing more and more in shopping centers. These little VR booths where you put your goggles on, and that's something that like I've never done because why? Never had the time, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but I guess we're going to see more and more of them pop up, and which is good. Like I'll eventually be able to
Yeah.
try a proper simulator. There are a lot of roller coaster ones. I think that's why I haven't done it. Roller coasters don't don't interest VR roller coasters.
Yeah, I think that having a layer of interactivity with it, so you're not just kind of a passive observer in a lot of ways, makes it uh, makes it way more enjoyable for a lot of people. Um, so, and that actually brings up another kind of thing that I want to talk about is the fact that having those things set up in shopping centers and all that is actually a really powerful marketing tool because
Yeah.
VR is something that naturally draws the attention of a lot of people.
Hmm.
So having those setups and having those things there means that people see that and they just kind of click onto it. And we find that anytime that we set up double shot, even if it's somewhere that's not even remotely related to our target audience or our game or games or anything like that, people still kind of flock to it because they want to try on the headset. They want to see what it's all about, and at that point, the game almost becomes secondary. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been really interesting to see this whole huge rise of VR and see what people are doing with it. So,
So a little bit different, but augmented reality. So Pokemon, like Pokemon Go and stuff, but where you can use. I guess it's kind of like VR. That like it's put some on. I guess this is talking about about a future thing here. You put some
yeah,
glasses on, and you'll be able to see stuff out of the glasses. So yeah, pop some glasses on, and you're able to see, and you play games as you walk down the street, and you don't have to have your phone out. I think that's something that I'm excited for because it'll eventually happen. And something like your game could be introduced into that, I guess. Like, but I'm not going to go around shooting people in the street with my glasses on. It'll be more of a home game, and I could,
yeah,
but I could play it, and it would be look like still chilling at home
yeah,
and but
absolutely. Like I think
pouring
that
drinks and
AR, yeah, AR is probably going to be one of the resultant emerging technologies uh, from virtual reality. Is this whole idea of applying uh, showing people information in cool, new, and different ways. And one of the big ones is definitely going to be AR. It's going to be putting on a pair of glasses or a visor, like the HoloLens or something like that, and being able to see all the cool things you can do with that. And there's a company at the moment, Magic Leap, who
Yeah.
are doing a lot of cool things with that. They kind of have a daunting task ahead of them where they basically got all of this money and they now have to produce results, and they have been producing results, but it's such a hard thing to produce results
Yeah.
for that the stuff that they've done so far has been pretty cool.
Sorry, what company was that?
They're called Magic Leap.
Magic. All right, thank you. I'll just have a quick. I have the chance because I haven't heard of them.
Yeah.
And as I said, AR is something cool. I'm interested in the AR industry. Want to be in
Absolutely.
because it's something that's accessible. You have your mobile. And
absolutely. And like, look, when Pokemon Go came out, man, I was already sprinting down the street,
yeah,
looking out for, you know, I'm not a huge Pokemon fan, but I just thought the idea of having a game and the way that it encouraged uh, relatively safe real world interactions was really cool, because you had this like kind of global phenomenon, this idea of having a really cool thing that also used AR that people were able to talk about with each other to kind of encourage the sense of community and also provide an enjoyable game experience as well. So I think Pokemon Go was an especially awesome example of AR.
yeah,
I've seen a few like guided tours and stuff like that using AR that have been really cool. There's one in Sydney for the Rocks. That's awesome.
yeah,
And the thing about that, right, is it's making not just games accessible to people, but things like education, training, um, physical activity, all that kind of thing, accessible to other people. And that's one of the big things that I think VR can actually do is encourage people and gamify things in a way that means that they get to go out and do those things, and they might not necessarily feel like they're doing exercise, but
yeah,
they just walked 5 kilometers to hatch an egg or something without even realizing that they were necessarily doing it.
yeah,
And I think that in terms of general game design principles, that's really cool. But I think in terms of using technology and virtual reality and augmented reality to do that is just absolutely phenomenal.
definitely. As I said, I'm looking forward to it. I was a big Pokemon Go fan. Well, I'm a Pokemon fan, and I'm wearing a Ghastly T-shirt. Um, and like something like that, they done well, but they left a little bit out. I was a little bit disappointed, and I have given up on it now. I ended up getting to level
Yeah.
40. I ended up getting to almost level. I did play it quite a bit. I didn't actually
Yeah.
quite
Look,
get there.
I think that it was a good proof of concept thing. And I
Yeah,
think that going forward, it's now set a benchmark for the kind of enjoyable experience that you can provide
mm,
using AR.
yeah, yeah. So back to Double Shot.
Back to Double Shot.
Okay, so do you test the games yourself, or do you have a game tester?
So we kind of rely on we do a lot of internal testing, and it's kind of a double edged sword, because that sometimes you can be your most vocal critics, and other times you can just completely stick your head in the sand about something because it's something that you made or you designed, or it's something that you really like, but it's still got to go anyway.
Yeah,
I think one of the coolest things for us is each month, and this is once again going back to that whole having an amazing network of people around us. We get them to come through once a month, play test our game. They give us lots of useful and valuable feedback, especially about our user experience, like what needs to be explained to players more, what needs to happen, sort of thing. Um, and I think that we're now sort of slowly reaching a point where we're also going to be starting to reaching out to just people who own VR headsets to get them to play test our game,
yeah,
because the most honest feedback, even if it is biased, is probably the feedback that you get from complete strangers. Because especially over the internet, because a lot of the time they're just not afraid to tell you that your game sucks.
yeah,
Um, and when you're kind of getting friends to play test it, unless you're like really, really, really good friends, chances are
yeah,
they're not going to tell you what's wrong with your game. They're just going to be like, "Oh, yeah, man, that was great."
yeah, yeah. Like worried that they're gonna be. I don't know, like
Yeah, and it's like,
I know exactly where you're coming it's hard to be brutally honest, I guess. Is
Yeah, yeah. And we were definitely reaching a point of frustration where we were trying to work out how to make our game the best it possibly could be, and no one would tell us what was wrong with our game,
yeah,
which was super frustrating for us. But like eventually, we got to a point where we found a whole bunch of things that we needed to do in order to make it a more enjoyable experience. So
yeah,
I think what we've set out to do is to make this game, but we're starting to realize now that we need to dial it back a little bit and just try and make it as enjoyable an experience as possible.
yeah,
Even if it ends up not being as big as we want it to be. And I think once we've kind of dusted our hands of this being our first game, we're going to start thinking about other projects and other things that we can do. But right now, the biggest thing on our plates at the moment is just trying to get our user experience as good as possible. And the best way to do that is through play testing and hearing what people have to say.
yeah. So, do you know? Do you have a rough release date game?
Um, Honestly, at this point, we've just been telling people soon because once we start throwing a rough release date, then we have to start working towards a deadline. And
Yeah,
if there's one thing that Aberrant Realities is really bad at, it's sticking to deadlines. So, look, I think that what we're kind of focusing on at the moment is being able to deliver the most awesome experience possible we can to people at PAX Australia.
yeah,
We want our gameplay demo to like really blow people's socks off. Ideally, we would like to have something for people to buy
yeah,
at PAX Australia, but our main focus is about giving people their money's worth.
hmm,
Um, and I think that we really want to make something that we can be proud of. So that's been our experience for the past year and a bit, is making something that we can be proud of and hopefully people are willing to pay money for. So, and honestly, thus far, our early indications are that we've made something that's pretty good. So,
yeah. I'll personally. Oh, gotta stop stuttering. I'll be at PAX. I'll be at
yeah,
PAX, and
absolutely. Well, yeah.
I'll make sure I come down and I'll test it out. I'll,
Man, feel free, please. We need more honest feedback about it.
but I'll definitely come down and stop by and say, hey,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and if any of our listeners are at PAX, make sure you do go check them out and give them some honest feedback.
Yeah, we love honest feedback, and
Yeah.
I don't think any of us will be too offended if we get it.
Okay, so it can be profitable, be a little bit offensive sometimes. Yet the smallest infraction can snowball into a huge problem. Have you ever experienced this at all? Like, I know you've really like in another project or
Yeah, I don't think that we've ever, as a company or as individuals or as a company, ever set out with the express goal of making something where its purpose was to offend people. I think the idea of if something is offensive, then it's controversial and people talk about it.
yeah,
I think that, and this is me speaking personally. I don't necessarily speak for Aberrant Realities. I'm kind of injecting my own politics into this in a way. I think that being offensive for the sake of being offensive is not something that is necessarily going to give you the right um, give you the right reaction that you might be looking for. I think if something's controversial, then it opens up this dialogue, right? It opens up this idea of this is a topic that needs to be explored.
yeah,
However, say that say that there was a group of people or a community or a person who was offended by something that we made. I think our first step would be to, and this is purely on a case by case basis, I think our first step would be to open up a dialogue with that person and try to understand what it is that we can do in order to either alleviate their concerns
yeah,
or find a different way to deliver that message. Because I think that, and like I said before, being offensive for the sake of being offensive is not something that we as a company are interested in doing.
yeah,
And I think that once you have that dialogue and you listen to people and you understand what it is that they're saying, then you can go about correcting your mistake or changing something about what you're doing. So I think that if someone came to me tomorrow and said, I find this particular part of double shot to be offensive, I would say, okay, fair enough. Can you explain to me why it is offensive?
Yep.
And then I would think about, well, is that something that we could change about the game? Does it warrant a change? I think that the most important thing is to listen to people and to understand and empathize with their particular position on what you're making. So personally, we haven't had that issue yet, and sorry, touch wood. Hopefully, we don't offend anyone, because that's the last thing that we as a company want to do. But I think that if that eventually did arise, then we would simply look at ways to rectify that mistake.
So, yeah, taking information from every party and processing it in the right way, probably the best way to go about it.
Absolutely.
But not change core fundamentals over one person. They get offended. I guess is what this is me speaking.
Yeah.
Like if I was offensive and someone said to me, as you said, why am I offensive? Am I being offensive, or are you just and I'm not being offensive?
But
I don't want to say the wrong
having
thing
that conversation and listening to what people say would be important to us.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think it's also a case of we're probably not too interested in making something if it's going to upset people.
Yeah.
So, and like, to each their own. I think that we're fortunate enough to be in a position where we haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
We don't intend to do that. And I'm perfectly happy with where we're sitting at with regard to that. So
yeah, nice. All right, we'll move on. Okay, so you find it easy to gain musical artists that are willing to showcase their craft in your game?
Yeah, so this is this whole. It'd be cool to get, like Carpenter Brute or Perturbator or Gunship or someone to do our soundtrack, but at the end of the day, we're a small indie studio.
Yeah.
We haven't got a lot of money. Our programmer wrote all of our music.
Yep.
He did, in our opinion, an amazing job on it. People seem to really dig the soundtrack. So I think that if you're willing to find an artist who's going to collaborate with you and allow you to put their music into your game, I think that's amazing. I think that, like with anything else that goes into a game, they should be paid their fair share.
Yeah.
And in our case, because of that philosophy, because we are not able to pay them their fair share, or we're not willing to enter into a revenue deal or a royalties deal or anything like that, then we're perfectly happy just skirting around that issue. I happen to know that there are a few teams in this space that are working with the Australian National University School of Music, and they're finding a lot of artists there that are super interested in providing soundtracks and stuff, and whether they're doing that at cost or whatever. But I think if you wanted to get a well-known artist to do your game, then you kind of have to have the capital to back that up.
Yeah. So you get your who was it to do your music?
One of our programmers is also a very keen musician.
Okay, cool.
And he has done an awesome job writing the soundtrack. So
I might can you send me his details? I need if they, for my stream.
I'll ask him. I'll see. Yeah. I'll see if he's got some spare time.
Starting soon. On repeat. That's nice and still instead of playing Spotify and then getting banned. Not banned, but my
muted.
Yeah, my stream.
I'll see if he's available. He shouldn't be available because he has a lot of work on Double Shot to do. But if he wants to skive off for a couple of hours, then I certainly won't complain.
Like Ikami's like whatever. but getting on to something like that would be awesome. Okay, so best software to start with game design development, in your opinion.
Sorry, can you repeat the first part of that question for me?
Your best software.
The best software. If you're doing game design, I think any game that has a map editor in it. I started off very casually. The first thing I ever did was make multiplayer maps in the Halo Forge.
Yep.
And that was when I was about 12, 13. I just played a lot of games. And while I was playing about them, I was thinking about them. I was thinking, like, it's really cool that they did this way. This happens for this reason. This dialogue results in this because, they've got to present X amount of options or whatever. I think that once you kind of get beyond that stage where you're starting to flex your own creative muscles, and you've seen what people have to offer, you've seen what you can do with the existing tools. I think it's important for a designer to have a lot of knowledge of how game engines work. So
Yep.
having something open like Unity Engine or Unreal Engine is a really good way for them to launch into that. I'm also a pretty big believer in just like making choose your own adventure novels or something in like something like Twine is another really cool way of doing it. There's just any way that you can find to kind of express yourself is always going to be beneficial to your development as a game designer, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Going on the software, there's a game coming out on the PlayStation 4 to be announced. Right? I think I haven't got a release. Game that lets you make anything. An essentially user-free, friendly set of tools of making your own video games. It's called Dream. I'm not sure if you heard of it.
I have not heard of Dream. I'll have to go and have a look at it because honestly, that sounds really cool. And I think that this is the cool thing that's happening now, right? Is making games is more accessible to people than it ever has been.
Yeah.
It's no longer locked behind this gate of you have to be a programmer in order to make games, because you have things like visual scripting, which is essentially connecting boxes together. And that's a form of programming, right? And that means that people who don't know anything about programming like me can still go out and make games.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, what was the name of it? Was it Dream?
Dreams.
Dreams.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Like, I'm genuinely curious about this now, right? Because anything new that comes onto the market that lets you make games is always going to be interesting to me, because the idea of getting as diverse a range as possible of people to be able to make games is the dream for this industry, right? Because for a long time, it's been a male-dominated, tech-heavy industry.
Yeah.
And the idea of being able for anyone can now make a game, and anyone can enjoy it, and anyone can learn. And even I'm noticing now that kids from a younger age are learning how to code.
Yeah.
They're learning Photoshop and all that sort of thing. That is excellent to me, because the way that the digital industry is going now is these things need to be more accessible to people, and being tech literate is one of the most important skills that's going to happen in the next few years. So I think that having something like Dream, super cool.
Yeah, so
thank you so much for putting me onto that.
I'll just read a little Okay, so because you can literally make anything in Dreams, it's from the people who made Little Big Planet, and its aim is to be a set of tools that allow everyone to make their own video games, short movies, or visual stories. Hugely ambitious, and the key to its success will be making the tool simple enough to use but powerful enough to be able to fulfill anything in the player's imagination. Sounds absolutely insane, and it could be a game changer.
Yeah,
is pretty much what that little thing said.
And that's really cool, right?
Yeah. Oh man, if something like that came out,
that's like
I'd be just playing around with it and having fun and like.
Yeah. Because
I have like a million ideas in my head, and I have no idea what to do with them, because I'm a potato with anything that comes with to do with computers.
And I think that's the case for a lot of people, where they have all of these and everyone has good ideas. Like, I'm a firm believer that even if one person has a million bad ideas in their life, they're always still going to have
Yeah.
100,000 like good ideas. Like,
Yeah.
people always have good ideas, and being able to execute on those ideas is usually the barrier that prevents people from creating that. And I think that when you introduce something like this, that while not necessarily being designed for super robust AAA creation, or it could be, but being able to give the average person the experience of doing something fun and creative, like picking up a canvas and a set of acrylics and painting on that canvas,
Yeah.
being able to do something like that and give them a creative release is, in my opinion, super awesome. And I think game development is a great creative release. So I'm super happy to hear that a program like that is out.
Yeah, I'm not quite. I'd have to. I've only just recently seen it, so I haven't done any research. But I will be looking into it a little bit more, and I'll be buying it. Yep. I've never actually used Photoshop at all in life. As I said, I'm not very computer savvy. I know how to do a virus check and make sure my
Look, you managed to get a stream working, so
yeah
that's more than most people can do. But yeah, and I think that as the younger generations start coming up, there's going to be a lot more tech literacy, and I think it's going to be on us older people to try and keep up with them.
oh yeah my son knows. And he's 5.
Yeah,
But
it almost seems like it's just ingrained in them from birth now that
yeah
they can just pick up a tablet and know exactly where to go. So
yeah definitely
it's yeah.
This is something that like this is a big. I think as the thing says, it can be a game changer
Absolutely.
for someone like me that doesn't have the money to start because I don't have anywhere near a decent enough computer. I have a Lenovo laptop running everything off.
Yeah.
That even if I did have the money, I wouldn't know where to start. Like I know where to start,
Yeah.
but not very. I wouldn't know how to code or that.
Yeah.
Stuff
And
like
I
that.
think that it's a big time investment to start to learn those things. So anything that saves you time and gets you to the fun part, which is making it, is always going to be something that's valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for stopping by, Sage. So yeah, I'm something I'm definitely, and I didn't play a Little Big Planet. Did
No, I was never really. I had an Xbox 360.
yeah
I grew up on like a tiny farm in the middle of nowhere, so I had like no online or anything like that. So
yeah
it was basically just me, the Halo 3 campaign, and making forge maps for me to play on by myself. So, and I think that's probably why I ended up being so interested in like story based games and
yeah
just making maps and doing all that kind of thing, was the simple fact of I didn't really have much else to do. So, but like I think that the concept of, and this is something that I've noticed even in the latest Divinity game, is shipping the toolkit with the game was a really cool move, because it means that people can then go in and create their own experiences. And they also provided really good, even just like video documentation of how to use the engine. I went through it a little while ago, and it was super fun. It was just like a generally enjoyable experience. So I think getting people more, and people now, with the addition of things like mods and all that, which have been around for a long time but are really starting to become a lot more prevalent in games, it's creating this really cool atmosphere of everyone can contribute to the development of this game, even if they're not necessarily a programmer or an artist or whatever. They can still contribute something.
yeah yeah yeah. So much finished. Was there anything else? Before we
Just look, thanks so much for having me on here and talking to me for the last hour and 20 minutes. It was really enjoyable.
It was very enjoyable. And if you are interested, seeing what that aberrant realities is all about, go follow them on their Twitter at Devs.
That's the one.
So it's at ABRELB, and their website is doubleshotvr.com. So make sure you do go show them some love. I'd appreciate that. And if you are in Melbourne at PAX Australia, so you do go see them on October, somewhere around it.
Yeah, somewhere around that date. We'll be there for the whole Melbourne Indie Games Week, which is super exciting. I haven't been to Melbourne in about like 8 years or something, so
Yeah.
Super keen to see how it all is. Keen to get some food. Keen to get some snack packs.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, if you are in Melbourne, PAX, make sure you do go give them your honest opinion on their game, Double Shot VR, and as I'm sure they would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, do you have anything else you'd like to touch on?
No, thanks for listening to me ramble.
Oh man, ramblers are the best people to speak. I don't have to talk too much.
Yeah, look, once again, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. And I'm not sure if you know the thing called a raid. Me passing my viewers, other person.
Excellent.
Or I do this before. This is something else. Viewers.
Excellent.
He's playing. I play Fortnite. Hey Ray. He's doing a Nintendo Labo. That's a rerun. Oh. Person's playing NBA Spider-Man. I like Spider-Man. Spider-Man's me.
Perfect. Excellent way to end it.
Great. I just passed my viewers on to. Yeah, man. Question whenever. Sorry, I just cancelled it because. Shoot us a message on Twitter, Segs. Try again. Sorry about that. Thanks to all our viewers today. I appreciate you all.
Thanks for watching.
And thanks to Chris from Aberrant Realities joining us today. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it very much.
Yeah, our absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. It was great.
No worries. And more than welcome once you're big and famous to come back on our show.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be back. Don't you worry.
Done.
All right. Thank you so much, man. That was great.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming on. And
my pleasure.
About to go do